My family laughed when they destroyed my 7-year-old daughter's birthday cake. My little girl stood there crying while pink frosting slowly dripped across the kitchen floor. I thought that was the worst thing they could ever do to us. I was wrong. 3 days later, I opened my mailbox and found my sister's expensive wedding invitation. At the bottom, under official wedding sponsor, was my name. I had never agreed to pay for anything. I had no idea that one small detail would uncover years of lies. Stick with me, because this story gets even worse. My name is Marlo Bennett. I am a 34-year-old single mother raising my daughter, Harper, in Ohio. For most of my life, I was the person everyone depended on. Whenever someone in my family needed help, they called me. If they needed money, childcare, favors, or support, I was expected to provide it. My parents, Gordon and Patricia Bennett, always believed family came first. What they really meant was that I should always come last. Their favorite child was my younger sister, Lydia. Everything revolved around her wants, her needs, and her plans. At the time, Lydia was preparing for a huge wedding with her wealthy fiancé, Grant Holloway. Every family conversation was about the wedding. Every gathering focused on Lydia. Meanwhile, I was focused on something much more important. My daughter was turning 7 years old. Harper had spent months talking about her dream birthday cake. It was a beautiful princess cake with pink flowers and sparkling decorations. I worked extra shifts for weeks to afford it because I wanted her birthday to be special. The party was held at my parents' house. Relatives filled every room, and Harper could barely contain her excitement. She smiled all day and kept asking when it would be time to cut the cake. Then, everything changed. While arguing about wedding expenses, Lydia suddenly bumped into the cake table. The cake tipped over and crashed onto the floor. The room went silent. I expected an apology. Instead, Lydia laughed. A few relatives laughed too. Harper stared at the ruined cake before bursting into tears. My heart broke as I watched her cry. What hurt most was not the ruined cake. It was seeing how little anyone cared about my daughter's feelings. That night, I took Harper home and promised her I would make things right. I didn't know then that this was only the beginning of a much bigger betrayal. 3 days after Harper's birthday disaster, I was still trying to cheer her up. She was doing better, but every time she mentioned the ruined cake, my heart hurt all over again. That afternoon, I checked my mailbox after work. Among the bills and advertisements was a large cream-colored envelope with gold lettering. I immediately recognized it as Lydia's wedding invitation. For a moment, I considered throwing it straight into the trash. After what had happened at Harper's party, I wanted nothing to do with Lydia or her wedding. Still, curiosity got the better of me. I opened the envelope and pulled out the invitation. The wedding details were exactly what I expected. An expensive venue, a luxury reception, fancy decorations. Everything was designed to impress people. Then my eyes landed on a line near the bottom of the card. Official wedding sponsor, Marlo Bennett. I froze. My stomach dropped instantly. I read the line again, thinking I must have misunderstood. But there it was. My name, printed clearly for every guest to see. The problem was simple. I had never given Lydia a single dollar for her wedding. I had never agreed to sponsor anything. I hadn't even been asked. Confused and angry, I grabbed my phone and called Lydia immediately. She answered after a few rings. The moment I asked why my name was on the invitation, her attitude changed. Instead of explaining, she became defensive. She claimed I was overreacting. She said it was not a big deal. When I demanded a real answer, she grew irritated and told me to stop causing drama. A few minutes later, my mother joined the call. Patricia quickly dismissed my concerns. She called it a harmless gesture and said the family only wanted to honor me for always being supportive. Her explanation made no sense. If it was meant to honor me, why hadn't anyone mentioned it before printing hundreds of invitations? Something felt wrong. After ending the call, I sat quietly in my living room while Harper watched television nearby. The more I thought about it, the less comfortable I felt. That evening, I opened my banking app and began reviewing my finances. At first, everything looked normal. Then I noticed a payment I didn't remember making. A little later, I found another charge that seemed unfamiliar. Then another. None of them were large enough to attract attention on their own, but together they raised questions. For the first time in my life, I began wondering if my family had been hiding something from me. And deep down, I feared the truth might be far worse than I imagined. The next morning, I could not stop thinking about the strange charges I had found in my accounts. The wedding invitation was still sitting on my kitchen table, and every time I looked at it, I felt uneasy. After dropping Harper off at school, I took a day off work and went directly to my bank. I explained my concerns to a bank manager and asked if someone could help me review several old transactions. The manager listened carefully and agreed to investigate. For nearly 2 hours, we went through records from the past few years. At first, everything seemed ordinary. Then, the manager noticed several transfers connected to accounts linked to family businesses. I frowned. My family owned a few small business ventures over the years, but I had never been involved in managing them. The manager continued digging. Soon, more unusual transactions appeared. Thousands of dollars had moved through various accounts. What shocked me most was that many of the transactions showed authorization under my name. According to the records, I had approved them. But I knew that was impossible. I had never signed any of those documents. I had never even seen them before. The manager looked concerned and suggested requesting copies of the original paperwork connected to the transactions. I immediately agreed. Several days later, the documents began arriving. That evening, after Harper went to bed, I sat alone at my dining table and carefully reviewed every page. At first glance, the signatures looked like mine. The handwriting was similar. The letters were shaped almost the same way. But the longer I studied them, the more differences I noticed. The pressure of the pen was wrong. Certain letters were slightly different. The signatures were close enough to fool most people. But they were not mine. Someone had forged my name. The realization hit me like a punch to the stomach. My hands started shaking. For years, I had trusted my family completely. Now I was staring at proof that someone had been pretending to be me. I felt angry, hurt, and betrayed all at once. But instead of confronting anyone, I decided to stay quiet. I purchased folders and began organizing everything. Every document was copied. Every transaction was recorded. Every suspicious detail was saved. Meanwhile, life continued as normal for everyone else. Wedding preparations moved forward without any problems. Lydia posted photos of expensive decorations, designer dresses, and luxury venues on social media almost every day. She spent money as if there were no limits. As I watched her celebrate, one question kept growing in my mind. If my family was struggling financially, where was all this money really coming from? And how much of it had been taken using my name? Over the next several weeks, I spent every spare moment reviewing documents, bank records, and financial statements. What started as a few suspicious transactions quickly became something much bigger. The deeper I dug, the worse everything became. Each new document seemed to reveal another lie. I discovered several loans connected to different family ventures. Some were linked to businesses my parents had managed. Others were connected to projects that Lydia had been involved in over the years. At first, I hoped there had been some mistake. Maybe someone had accidentally used my information. Maybe there was an explanation I had not heard yet. But that hope disappeared quickly. Many of the loan documents contained signatures that looked like mine. I already knew they were forged. As I continued reviewing the paperwork, I noticed something even more disturbing. Some of the loans dated back almost 6 years. 6 years. That meant this was not a recent mistake. This had been happening for a very long time. I felt sick as I sat at my kitchen table surrounded by folders and paperwork. Every page seemed to reveal another betrayal. One document showed my parents listed as contacts on a loan application. Another contained emails discussing financial decisions connected to money borrowed under my name. Then I found records involving my uncle. He had signed paperwork connected to one of the business ventures. The evidence suggested he knew exactly what was happening. The realization was heartbreaking. My parents knew. Lydia knew. Even my uncle appeared to know. The people I trusted most had been hiding this from me for years. One evening, After Harper had gone to bed, I sat alone in the dark living room thinking about everything I had discovered. For the first time, I saw my family differently. I always believed they loved me, even when they took advantage of my kindness. Now I understood the truth. They did not see me as family. They saw me as a resource. Whenever they needed money, help, or support, they turned to me. Whenever I needed respect, understanding, or appreciation, they ignored me. Suddenly, Harper's ruined birthday party made perfect sense. The cake incident was not an accident followed by thoughtless laughter. It was another example of how little they valued us. They never respected me. They only needed me. The painful truth was impossible to ignore anymore. By then, I knew I could not stay silent. I was not interested in revenge. I wanted answers. I wanted the truth. Most importantly, I wanted proof. So I made a decision. Before Lydia's wedding arrived, I would uncover every secret they had been hiding. No matter how painful the truth turned out to be, I was going to find it. The more evidence I collected, the more complicated the situation became. I realized I needed professional help if I wanted to understand everything hidden inside the documents. After researching several options, I scheduled a meeting with a lawyer who specialized in financial fraud cases. I brought every folder, bank statement, loan agreement, and suspicious document I had collected. The lawyer spent several days reviewing everything carefully. When we finally met again, his expression told me the news would not be good. He spread the documents across his desk and began explaining what he had discovered. The truth was worse than I imagined. My family was drowning in debt. For years, they had been borrowing money through various loans and financial agreements. Some of the businesses connected to those loans were struggling badly. Others appeared to be losing money entirely. The lawyer pointed out several documents connected to Lydia's wedding expenses: luxury vendors, venue deposits, decorations, travel arrangements. Large payments had been made using money connected to questionable financial agreements. As I listened, a terrible realization began forming. Lydia's dream wedding was not being funded by success or savings. It was being funded by debt. Even worse, much of that debt appeared connected to documents carrying my forged signature. The lawyer explained that if creditors learned the full truth, they could demand immediate repayment. The consequences would be severe. Businesses could collapse. Assets could be seized. The wedding itself might not survive the investigation. Then he showed me something even more disturbing. One particular loan stood out from the rest. According to the records, it was scheduled to default shortly after the wedding ceremony. The timing seemed too perfect to be accidental. As we reviewed the paperwork, the lawyer pointed to several details that connected the loan directly to my identity. That was when everything finally made sense. The wedding invitation, the sponsorship title, my name printed beneath, official wedding sponsor. They were creating a paper trail. If problems appeared after the wedding, they could point toward me. They wanted it to look as though I had been involved all along. I sat silently, trying to process everything. The betrayal felt almost impossible to understand. These were the people who claimed to love me. Yet they had planned to leave me responsible for their mistakes. The lawyer advised me to continue gathering evidence while avoiding confrontation. I agreed. From that day forward, I became even more careful. I documented every transaction. I copied every record. I saved every message. Meanwhile, wedding preparations continued without interruption. Lydia posted smiling photos online. My parents acted as if nothing was wrong. None of them had any idea that I now understood exactly what they had done. And I was getting closer to proving all of it. After learning the truth about the loans and forged documents, I faced an important decision. Part of me wanted to confront my family immediately. I wanted to demand answers. I wanted to know how they could betray me so completely. But the lawyer advised me to stay calm and be patient. The more evidence I gathered, the stronger my case would become. So I stayed silent. I acted as if nothing had changed. Behind the scenes, however, I was working harder than ever. My lawyer recommended hiring forensic accountants to examine the financial records. They specialized in tracking money and uncovering hidden transactions. Within days, They began reviewing years of bank statements, loan agreements, and business records. The results were shocking. Every forged document was carefully identified. Every suspicious transfer was traced. Every transaction connected to my name was documented. The evidence was becoming impossible to deny. I organized everything into folders and digital files. Every night after Harper went to sleep, I spent hours reviewing reports and updating records. Meanwhile, my family continued preparing for the wedding. My parents constantly pressured me to attend wedding events. My mother called almost every week. She wanted me at dress fittings, planning meetings, and family dinners. I agreed to attend just enough events to avoid raising suspicion. Whenever I saw them, I smiled and acted normal. Inside, I was counting every lie. Lydia seemed happier than ever. As the wedding approached, her arrogance became impossible to ignore. She constantly bragged about the luxury venue. She talked endlessly about her designer wedding dress. She showed off expensive decorations and elaborate plans for the reception. Every conversation revolved around how perfect her wedding would be. Friends and relatives praised her constantly. Nobody seemed to question where all the money was coming from. But I knew the truth. The entire celebration was built on lies. Every fancy detail represented debt, fraud, and deception. Sometimes it was difficult to stay quiet. Watching Lydia boast about her dream wedding made me angry. Watching my parents pretend everything was normal hurt even more. Still, I remained patient. The closer the wedding day came, the stronger my position became. New documents continued appearing. The forensic accountants uncovered additional records. The lawyer kept building the case. Piece by piece, the full picture was coming together. My family believed they were getting away with everything. They had no idea how much evidence already existed. Most importantly, they had no idea that I was preparing for the right moment. Timing would be everything. If I acted too soon, they might find a way to hide the truth. If I waited, there would be nowhere left for them to run. So I waited. And with every passing day, their carefully built world moved one step closer to collapse. Only 1 week remained before Lydia's wedding. By that point, I had already collected a huge amount of evidence. The forged signatures, suspicious loans, hidden debts, and financial records painted a clear picture of what had happened. Still, one problem remained. While I had evidence that my family benefited from the fraud, I needed proof that Lydia knowingly participated in it. Without that final piece, she could always claim she knew nothing about the money. Then, unexpectedly, the missing evidence arrived. A contractor working on the wedding contacted me, by accident. At first, he believed I was involved in approving some of the wedding expenses because my name appeared on several records. He sent copies of invoices and payment documents, expecting me to confirm certain details. The moment I opened the files, I knew something was different. I carefully reviewed every page. There, hidden among dozens of records, were approval forms connected to wedding expenses. Several of them contained Lydia's direct authorization. Even worse for her, the documents linked those expenses to accounts already connected to the fraudulent loans. My heart raced as I read through the paperwork. For months, I had been searching for proof that Lydia knew where the money came from. Now I finally had it. The records showed she approved payments tied directly to accounts created through fraudulent agreements. She could no longer claim ignorance. I immediately forwarded everything to my lawyer. The next day, we met in his office. After reviewing the new documents, he smiled for the first time since taking my case. He told me the evidence was solid. For the first time, we had proof connecting every major person involved. The case was now stronger than ever. Over the following days, my lawyer began taking careful action. Relevant authorities were informed. Creditors connected to the questionable loans received notifications. Financial investigators quietly began reviewing the records. Everything happened behind the scenes. No public announcements were made. No dramatic confrontations occurred. The process moved forward quietly and professionally. Meanwhile, life continued normally for the Bennett family. My mother spent her days discussing flower arrangements. My father worried about seating charts and guest lists. Lydia filled social media with countdown posts about her big day. She proudly shared photos of decorations, gifts, and wedding plans. None of them noticed what was happening around them. None of them realized investigations had already begun. None of them understood that years of deception were finally catching up to them. As for me, I stayed focused. I was no longer interested in arguments or family drama. I wanted accountability. I wanted the truth fully exposed. Most of all, I wanted justice for myself and for Harper. The storm was coming, and while my family celebrated the approaching wedding, I quietly prepared for the truth to finally come out. The wedding day finally arrived, and the whole venue looked like something from a dream. White flowers lined the entrance, soft music played in the background, and expensive decorations filled every corner. Guests arrived in fancy clothes, smiling and greeting each other. Everyone believed they were attending a perfect celebration. Lydia walked around proudly, acting like everything she had planned for months was finally coming true. Her parents were busy welcoming guests and pretending to be calm. Grant stood near the front, looking confident, expecting a smooth and beautiful ceremony. For a while, everything seemed normal. Then small problems began to appear. A vendor arrived late and refused to set up his equipment. He said there was an issue with payment. At first, the family tried to fix it quickly, thinking it was just a misunderstanding. But within minutes, another vendor made the same announcement. Then another. Confusion started spreading through the venue. Phones began ringing nonstop. Messages came in. Staff members whispered urgently to each other. The mood slowly changed from excitement to worry. Soon, things became even worse. Several creditors arrived at the venue. They were not there to celebrate. They were there to ask questions and demand answers about unpaid debts and suspicious accounts connected to the wedding expenses. After them, lawyers appeared. Their presence made everything feel serious and tense. Guests who had come to enjoy a happy event now started looking around in confusion. People began whispering to each other, trying to understand what was happening. No one had clear answers. Lydia's confident smile disappeared. She started panicking, moving quickly from one person to another, trying to fix things that were already falling apart. Her parents tried to explain, but their voices sounded weak and uncertain. They could not control the situation anymore. Grant finally stepped forward. He demanded the truth. He wanted to know why payments were failing and why so many legal problems were suddenly appearing on his wedding day. But there were no clear answers left to give. Everything that had been carefully planned for months was now collapsing in front of everyone. The beautiful illusion was breaking apart in real time, right in front of hundreds of guests. And in the middle of it all, I stood quietly. I did not speak. I did not interfere. For the first time, I was not the one fixing their problems. I was not cleaning up their mess. I simply watched as the truth finally started to show itself in the open. Investigators stepped forward in front of everyone, and the noise in the venue slowly died down. The celebration atmosphere was completely gone. People stood in silence, waiting to understand what was happening. One by one, the evidence was shown. First came the forged signatures. Documents were displayed that carried my name, but I had never signed them. The handwriting looked close, but experts confirmed they were fake. Then came the fraudulent loans. Large amounts of money had been taken under my identity and linked to family business accounts. The numbers shocked everyone listening. After that, hidden debts were revealed. The true financial situation of the family was far worse than anyone had imagined. What looked like a wealthy celebration was actually built on years of borrowing and deception. Finally, false sponsorship records were shown. The wedding itself had been funded through accounts tied to lies, and my name had been used as part of a cover story. As each piece of evidence was presented, the truth became impossible to ignore. Grant stood frozen as he listened. The confident man who was ready to marry into the Bennett family slowly realized everything he believed was wrong. Lydia had hidden the truth from him completely. When he finally understood the full situation, his expression changed. The wedding was no longer something to celebrate. It had become something built on lies. He made his decision right there. The wedding was canceled. That announcement hit the room like a shockwave. Everything fell apart immediately. Guests started leaving in confusion and discomfort. Some whispered in disbelief. Others looked angry for being involved in something so dishonest. Inside the family, chaos began. My parents tried to defend themselves, but their words only created more arguments. Lydia started blaming them. They blamed her back. Old tensions that had been hidden for years suddenly exploded. Family members who once supported each other began turning against one another. Everyone was trying to protect themselves. Years of secrets came out in pieces. Lies that had been buried for a long time finally surfaced in front of everyone. Through all of this, I stayed calm. I finally spoke, not with anger, but with truth. I told them exactly how their actions had hurt me and Harper. I explained the pain they had caused, the betrayal, and the years of being used without respect. For the first time, no one interrupted me. No one could deny it anymore. Everything was clear. The family image they had carefully built over the years collapsed completely in front of everyone. What remained was the truth, and it could not be hidden anymore. 1 year later, everything in my life felt different in the best way. The long investigations were finally over. All the reports had been completed, and the truth about the fraud and hidden debts was fully confirmed. Several members of my family were now facing serious financial and legal consequences. The world they built on lies had completely fallen apart. But for me, that part of life no longer controlled my thoughts. For the first time in many years, I felt truly free. No more constant pressure. No more manipulation. No more being used as the solution to everyone else's problems. I could finally breathe without fear of what my family might do next. Most importantly, Harper was happy again. She had gone through so much for a child her age. The ruined birthday cake, the chaos, the confusion, and everything that came after had affected her deeply. But children are strong in ways adults sometimes forget. Slowly, she started smiling more again. She became cheerful, playful, and full of energy like before. When her 8th birthday came, I wanted to make sure it was completely different from the last one. So I planned a small and simple celebration. There were no expensive decorations, no stress, and no pressure to impress anyone. Just a warm home filled with kindness. Only a few close people were invited. People who genuinely cared about us. People who were kind, honest, and safe. No drama came with them. No selfish relatives showed up. No hidden tension filled the room. For the first time, everything felt peaceful. Harper laughed as she played with her friends. She enjoyed every moment without worry. When it was time for the cake, she sat in front of it with shining eyes. As she blew out her candles, her smile was brighter than I had seen in a long time. In that moment, I realized something important. I had spent so many years thinking justice meant exposing my family or watching them lose everything. But standing there, watching my daughter happy and safe, I understood the truth. The real revenge was not destruction. It was freedom. It was building a life where we were no longer hurt by people who never valued us. And even though those who betrayed us lost everything they built on lies, Harper and I finally gained something far more meaningful. A real family, a peaceful life, and a future that belonged only to us.